I was born in Phoenix to a mother who had already learned how to live. Mom, Evelyn, met Dad, Nate, when Hope still wore denim and dared big. They laughed at the math, called it fate with a sideways grin. At 41 and 21, they held me, bright as a kitchen bulb. For a decade, age was only wallpaper, quietly patterned, never loud. In those early years, love sounded like radio crackle and Sunday pancakes. We lived in a small house where windows cheered for sunrise. Dad taught me how to whistle. Mom taught me how to listen. They danced in the hallway, clumsy and reverent, to borrowed songs. I believed families were weatherproof if you sang often enough. The day the storm arrived, the air smelled like rain and pennies. I wore a white skirt with blue letters that felt like summer. Mom called me into her room. Her sleeve was already wet. They sat on opposite sides of the bed, gravity refusing grace. "We're separating," they said, and the carpet lifted under me. My mouth remembered how to breathe. The rest of me forgot. Childhood slid like a photograph dropped into a sink. I watched the ceiling tilt, the future divide into two addresses. They apologized as if sorry could glue ceramic once it shattered. Something unlearned its name inside my ribs and wouldn't answer. Afterward, weekends smelled like charcoal and the ache of unsaid. Dad met a woman his age who preferred me edited out. She called me rude and wild so smaller rooms would fit. He believed her once and hit me. A bright thing cracked. I was 10 and learned fathers are also men with choices. At 18, Dallas rained like the sky had finally confessed. My cousins begged me to go out. I said no, then yes. The lantern glowed neon, a heartbeat on a wet street. Inside, an old friend hugged me like we were still 13. "Lauren," he whispered, "my buddy is already gone for you." I laughed, pretended calm, bargained with midnight like a card shark. 1:30, I said. Show him again and make the room hush. When I finally turned, there he was, Michael, tall and steady. His eyes carried patience and a tremor he tried to hide. He touched my shoulder as if a cathedral might ring. He kissed me against a railing, and my ribs learned percussion. Outside, tires hissed over puddles like a chorus of snakes. Inside, I heard the future hum through the club's poor speakers. By Sunday noon, he called our landline like repentance and ritual. "Movies and never stop?" he asked, already halfway to promise. On Monday, he asked me to be his girlfriend, military crisp. I said yes to a man in a country shaped like hope. We were not jealous. Cages were for birds we didn't own. If I ever had to search pockets, I would rather leave. Love, to me, was a window that insisted on staying open. We planned a wedding in whispers, while the world rehearsed ruin. We believed peace meant we were made of the right material. I mistook quiet for safety and faithfulness for furniture. Later I would learn peace can also be anesthesia. But then, it was a hymn that fit our mouths. We married in 2007 and rented an apartment with loud pipes. Michael shipped out on rotations. I memorized the clocks of distance. We tried for a baby and bought time by the vial. Needles, hormones, bruised hips, and ceilings. I counted to stay brave. Every waiting room was a stage where I performed unlonely. Pregnancy found me, and pain found the corners where fear hid. He deployed again, and I learned to lift hope like furniture. Mom's mind dimmed, a porch light flickering in indifferent wind. I drove her to doctors with my belly like a lantern. The nurse called me brave. I called it Tuesday, and love. Grace arrived and turned the silence into fluent gold. Angela, my mother-in-law, washed my hair when milk burned. Michael was home, then not. Orders stapled to our calendar. Cracked nipples, fever, prayers with no performance notes attached. He slept downstairs while Angela whispered, "Go to her." I labeled nothing a red flag. I called it weather. Family, I thought, was armor even when it pinched. I changed air filters and folded tiny socks shaped like hope. At 2 a.m., pediatric fevers taught me new constellations. I told myself this was the cost of a house worth keeping. We leaned on routines until they gossiped into ritual. I stitched myself to errands, to recipes, to reachable joys. Every yes I gave the day postponed the audit of us. Our love felt like a lighthouse slowly learning to blink. I chose meaning over comfort and called it devotion. Years rolled by like interstates, exits named after patients. We dreamed of Florida, a reboot made of sun and salt. He trained harder, went farther. I mastered the art of waiting. Grace grew wild and bookish. I wrote her down daily. We weren't perfect, only practiced, a dance learned by feet. Then came Antarctica, a 13-month ghost at the Earth's hem. Baby, the pay will launch us toward Orlando when I retire. He kissed the promise like an oath he could taste. Grace cried rivers. I built bridges out of explanation. He held the doorframe like a question and walked through. Technology made absence closer and more confusingly present. He read poems into pixelated nights from a white horizon. He loved me, loved us, loved the life we called ordinary. In October, he sent a bouquet wide as a shield. Another 25, the card said, and I trusted arithmetic. Snow scoured his days. I scrubbed ours with detergent and hope. I learned the quiet ways a house names its owner, bills, birthdays, the small heroism of showing up on time. I kept a list of miracles disguised as chores. The future glowed like a billboard promising cheaper gas ahead. When storms rattled the roof, I told Grace it was music. We slept under one blanket and called it a tent. I believed the cold would end and send him home thawed. I believed the map would reward us for our miles. Belief is a soft animal that trusts your hands. November 24th, Orlando arrivals was a hive of joy. Families broke into running like waves, meeting their names. Michael walked, not ran, like he'd just parked outside. Grace flew at him. I filmed the reunion we rehearsed. He patted her back like burping a stubborn memory. At home, shrimp sizzled, balloons hovered, hope warmed its voice. He went upstairs to nap, then hugged me from behind. He kissed my neck and said, "Shower," like a reset switch. I told my best friend, "He's thawing, I think." Evening entered the windows, carrying lavender and doubt. Grace sorted souvenirs with him, small treasures loud as drums. She slipped to the kitchen with eyes as careful as sirens. "Mom," she whispered. "He texted a woman a heart. Are you sure?" I asked, stirring denial into garlic. "A heart is for love," she said, suddenly older. I asked him. He shrugged, called it nothing. Bad angle. Confidence tried to braid itself into camouflage on his face. I pressed again. The air tightened like a new shoe. At last, "Okay." I met someone there. Fell heavy. 30. Stationed, temporary, suddenly permanent in my kitchen. His apology was a script that forgot my language. My hands remembered shaking. My mouth tasted of pennies. A decade of dances rewound to the first missed step. I looked at our couch and saw a witness unwilling. The shrimp burned. The balloons tilted toward the floor. His words moved like fish under ice. Visible and unreachable. I watched his mouth, not his meaning, and heard ending. "She wants me to leave," he said, and I left my body. "What will you do?" I asked the humming ceiling fan. He cried, but his tears forgot my name on purpose. I walked the hallway counting breaths like rosary beads. This wasn't sex. It was trespass in the temple of us. You cannot bring a stranger into a sanctuary and call it weather. I held the counter and felt my mother's ghost frown. I told myself I could still negotiate with the fire. He said it began in the cold, where silence grows teeth. He said isolation makes fools of faithful men and queens of lies. He said words like storm, as if thunder begs forgiveness. I said words like home, as if walls can plead. Between us, a draft opened and would not close. I thought of my father's choice and my mother's ache. I thought of Grace's hair in my hands like future. Promises rust when you stop oiling them with ordinary devotion. We had starved our marriage on diet portions of presents. The pantry of us echoed with empty jars. By midnight, the house learned our voices in past tense. He touched my shoulder like apologizing to furniture. I studied his face for the man I married. The resemblance was there, like a relative who drinks. Respect left, and silence took his side. Her call arrived bright and vulgar on our kitchen island. He answered in front of me, in front of Grace, in our house, built from calendars and casseroles and vows. I watched his lips say hello to the woman in my place. Grace stared at the floor as if mercy hinged there. I gestured no. He kept going, weak and willing. Her voice leaked through the speaker like bleach in milk. He said, "I'll call you back," and didn't end it fast. My hands shook. My mouth found the taste of winter. My father, my mother, my daughter. Knives passed down. When he hung up, I begged the photograph of family. Not for him, I know now, but for the picture frame. He said sorry, the way people sneeze. Polite, automatic. Useless. By midnight, we were strangers leaning against the same wall. We shared oxygen and nothing else that wanted saving. Grace couldn't sleep. The house clicked like a nervous clock. I told her, "Daddy's worried about a friend in the hospital. She is kind enough to pretend and smart enough to know." At 2 a.m., I showered and cried into tile. Water taught me decisions louder than thought ever could. I stood dripping and chose the thin, sharp truth. I would not become a detective who forgets she's human. I would not bargain with ghosts for crumbs of peace. I would not rent a room to sorrow for decades. I would learn the map out, even barefoot, even bleeding. Work flew me to Seattle, and the rain knew my name. Each drop tapped the window like questions I'd avoided for years. He FaceTimed. I ignored. Then came the text. "Please pick up." I said I was interviewing, which was true, but not the whole truth. The real interview was with the woman I had become. Alone in that hotel, I finally met the mirror without witnesses. I saw the circles under my eyes like faded wedding rings. I saw a woman still bargaining with ghosts for crumbs of love. If I stayed, I'd count minutes, not miracles, perfume, not peace. I would become a detective, a shadow, a half-life with mascara. I remembered Mom's 26 years of unburied sorrow. Her eyes had turned into small, polite graves over time. She waited for men to return, for apologies that never mailed. I swore Grace would never inherit that kind of waiting. I promised my daughter a mother who could choose the sun. When I came home, I asked him not to answer her here. He said yes, then did it anyway, right in our shared kitchen. Grace folded into herself, a letter never mailed to heaven. We kept sleeping together, desperate and bruised with longing. Grief can disguise itself as passion when you're drowning slow. Each morning I woke beside the ghost of a familiar face. His scent, once safety, now smelled like someone else's skin. I wrote my pain in invisible ink across the bathroom mirror. It spelled, "Leave before you vanish entirely." And for the first time, I started to believe I could. I set a deadline. December 6th, find a place and go. He said money was tight, that Airbnbs were unfair. He said words like sacrifice while I packed in silence. I looked at him and saw a boy inside a man's uniform. I saw all the red flags I had once folded into origami hope. New Year's Eve, Grace waited by the window for his call. She wore glitter and held 2 plastic champagne cups. At midnight, fireworks burst and she whispered, "Maybe now." He was at a rave, 50, and chasing a younger version of youth. When he finally called, it was 1 p.m, hungover and hollow. That day, something unclenched inside my chest without permission. It was not hatred, just release, like air leaving a balloon. That night, I cried one last time, cleanly, like surgery. I buried a version of him and of me in the same grave. "Widowhood of the living," I whispered, and meant it. The man I married had left for Antarctica and never came back. The body that returned was a stranger with my husband's laugh. He looked the same but carried no temperature for us. I watched him light cigarettes in the dark like small denials. The spark only made the absence more visible. By February, I could say his name without bleeding. By March, I could sleep without rehearsing conversations. Grief softened into something like distant music. I began dreaming of new cities, new ceilings, new air. I started packing not to escape, but to begin again. Weekends became excuses shaped like other people's needs. He'd cancel visitation because plans came up, always vague. Grace would pretend she didn't care, but her eyes told stories. Deja vu tastes metallic when you're the grown-up now. I remembered being 10 and choosing silence over bruises. I refused to let history sign her homework this time. I applied for a master's program in Miami on a dare. I told the truth on the essay. I am rebuilding a life. The acceptance letter felt like oxygen after long drowning. Grace squealed, "Does this mean palm trees?" And I smiled yes. I quit the job that had become a slow suffocation. Sold furniture, donated clothes, trimmed our lives to what fit. Hope hummed again, bright and reckless in both our throats. Michael said, "I don't know if I'll allow it." Grace looked up and said, "You don't get to." He blinked, confused, as if authority still belonged to him. She stood there, 10 and fierce, her mother's daughter. "I want what you promised and didn't deliver," she said. It wasn't anger. It was truth in its simplest form. And truth, I've learned, does not ask for permission. The papers were signed reluctantly, like surrender in slow motion. I booked 2 one-way tickets and didn't look back once. The world outside the window felt wider, forgiving. Grace held my hand and whispered, "We're free now, right?" "Yes," I said, even if freedom still trembled on my tongue. He offered child support like it was a casual favor. I hired a lawyer who spoke in calm thunder. Each document had weight, each signature, a small resurrection. He was stunned that actions had legal names and consequences. I asked for the apartment to be held for Grace, not ghosts. Friends called with rumors, raves, smoke, strange company. His laughter was now currency for strangers in dim rooms. I blocked him everywhere, chasing quiet like religion. We spoke only about pickup times and report cards. Boundaries became the new language of my peace. Miami welcomed me like the ocean recognizes shipwreck survivors. I landed a correspondent role after years of shrinking dreams. A woman I once comforted recommended me in gratitude. On live camera, my voice no longer trembled. It rang. At 44, I became the version of me I once prayed for. Grace started school under sunlight that forgave our past. She learned Spanish phrases and surfed the first wave of joy. Our apartment smelled like citrus and second chances. I hung one photograph, just her, laughing, whole. Sometimes betrayal is a terrible bridge that still leads to light. At night, I walked the beach, letting salt rewrite my memories. Waves erased his name over and over, patient teachers. I didn't hate him anymore. I pitied his smallness. Addiction to chaos is still addiction, even if it wears love's clothes. I was finally sober from him. He asked if Grace wanted to meet the girlfriend. She said, "I want my father, not your +1. He blinked like sunlight had scolded him for pretending. I didn't coach her. Strength was already fluent in her mouth. Consequences are patient tutors. He finally met his class. Neighbors texted photos of that woman in my old elevator. The couch, the bed. They whispered like scavengers of memory. I told them peace doesn't need an audience to exist. Let them sit where love once prayed. It won't answer. A home is more than walls. It's the heartbeat inside them. I began calling myself a widow, not dramatic, just accurate. You can mourn the living when the soul has left the building. I didn't hate him. I hated the harm he protected. And I didn't envy her. I pitied the ceiling she settled for. Grace laughed again. Careful, but clear. A new dawn sound. We built small rituals. Cooking, dancing, telling truths aloud. She painted shells and left them by the shore for closure. Each one read, "We're okay now." I started believing her handwriting more than my doubts. Healing isn't fast, but it's faithful when invited. Sometimes I see him in dreams. Younger, unbroken. I wake with softness, not rage, and whisper, "Thank you anyway." He was the storm that revealed my strength, and Grace, the calm that followed. We survived him, and that's its own kind of holy. People ask how I stopped loving him completely. The truth, nothing worthy remained to love. Love requires admiration. Decay has no pedestal. Once respect is gone, desire starves and disappears. I chose hunger over poison, clarity over habit. I teach Grace that pain is cotton, not stone. You carry it, soft and temporary, until you can set it down. We walk beaches at dusk, rewriting our lullabies with laughter. Sometimes we cry mid-sentence and still finish the story. Every day, we practice not renting rooms to sorrow. If you're reading this with your heart on fire, listen closely. You can leave the burning house even if barefoot. You can rebuild without witnesses and still call it victory. You can be your own rescue, your child's soft landing. Morning always waits, but it never knocks twice. I was a girl who watched her father believe a stranger, then a woman who watched her husband answer one. Now I'm a mother who answers herself first. Florida sun on my face, microphone in my hand, spine whole.